The war room was silent as Rose stood at the table, her fingers drumming a slow, deliberate rhythm against the worn wood. Her mind raced with possibilities, risks stacking against each other like an unsteady tower. Derren stood beside her, arms crossed, his usual smirk absent for once. Gunnar sat across from them, his expression unreadable, his cybernetic fingers tapping idly against his knee. Eliana leaned against the far wall, arms folded, watching. This was a bad idea, but it was the only one she had. Concordia's locked down, Rose muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Every back door I knew is sealed, every hidden route, burned. She exhaled sharply, rubbing her forehead. I need another way in. Gunnar's one good eye flicked toward her, waiting. Derren snorted. And? Rose hesitated, then muttered the name like she hated it. Atherin. The air in the room shifted. Derren snapped upright. Wait, Atherin? A slow grin spread across his face. You mean where the hot demon chicks live? Eliana groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. Gunnar shot him a glare, but Derren just raised his hands innocently. What? I'm just saying. If we're going to a realm ruled by 3 deadly beautiful demon queens, I'd like to know how much trouble we're walking into. Rose rolled her eyes. Less trouble than trying to break into Concordia alone. Lissandra controls the strongest transport network between realms. If anyone can smuggle me in, it's her. Gunnar's jaw tightened slightly, and for the first time since she said the name, he spoke. Lissandra and her sisters don't take charity work. No, Rose agreed, but they do honor debts. Silence. Gunnar leaned forward, his voice calm but edged. You're assuming she'll help you. You're assuming she won't. Eliana cut in, voice smooth. You're also assuming she doesn't already know about Draven's movements. If the Black Dawn's network is expanding, Atherin has felt it. Lissandra's smart. She won't let his forces reach her borders unchecked. Rose nodded. Exactly. She has just as much reason to keep Draven out as we do. That's leverage. Derren snorted. Or she'll just kill us for fun and call it a day. Gunnar exhaled through his nose, then pushed back from the table. Without another word, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, rune-inscribed talisman, a relic of his past dealings with Atherin. The last time he'd held it, he'd lost an arm and an eye. He tossed it onto the table. If we do this, we do it my way, he said. I reach out to Lissandra. If she agrees to a meeting, we go. But if she decides we're worth more dead than alive, we won't be walking out. Rose picked up the talisman, rolling it between her fingers. When do you call her? Gunnar didn't answer. He just activated the rune. The room was silent as the talisman's glow dimmed, the weight of ancient magic settling over them. Then the connection solidified, and a familiar voice slipped through, smooth, knowing, edged with amusement. Gunnar, it's been too long. Lissandra. Eliana exhaled sharply while Derren leaned against the desk with a smirk. Gunnar, as always, remained unreadable. Liss, he greeted, his voice measured. I should be offended, she continued, all these years and not even a message. And now when you do reach out, it's because you need something. Typical. Rose rolled her eyes. We don't have time for the guilt trip. Lissandra laughed, a low, rich sound. And who is this? A new recruit. Gunnar cut in before Rose could snarl back. She's the reason I'm calling. We need quiet passage into Concordia. Silence. Then her voice lost its teasing edge. Concordia? Something in that single word sent a prickle of unease through the room. I assume this has to do with Draven? Lissandra continued. Gunnar didn't answer. He didn't have to. He's making moves, she said, her tone shifting into something closer to calculation. The Black Dawn is expanding. I've had reports of his forces near the outer territories. Rose stepped forward. Then you know he's after something. We need to get ahead of him. Lissandra hummed softly. And why should I care? That time Gunnar didn't hesitate. Because I saved your life. A sharp silence followed. Lissandra wasn't one to be cowed by debts, but Gunnar wasn't playing games. He didn't barter with empty words. Finally she sighed. You never did let me forget that. You owe me, he said evenly. I'm calling it in. And just like that, I'm supposed to open my borders and smuggle your people across? If I had asked for anything else, you'd have already agreed. Another pause, then a soft, almost grudging chuckle. Fine, Gunner. You win. Derren grinned. He always does. Lissandra ignored him. I'll arrange transport, but listen closely. Things aren't the same here. If you're coming to Atherin, tread carefully. I have control, but stability is fragile. Understood, Gunner said. I'll send a guide. Meet them at the crossing point by sundown tomorrow. And, Gunner? He waited. Next time, try calling just to talk. The connection cut. A heavy silence settled in the room. Rose arched a brow. She likes you. Derren burst out laughing. Oh yeah, she definitely likes you. Gunner just exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Pack your gear. We leave at dawn. Derren, hands casually shoved into his pockets, leaned toward Rose, a lazy smirk playing at his lips. He kept his voice low, but just loud enough to carry. Did you catch that tone? Damn, thought she was going to melt through the floor when Lissandra purred Gunner's name like that. Rose arched a brow, glancing toward where Gunner stood with Eliana. She smirked. Wonder if she still makes him call her Mistress Lissandra, or if she's dropped the formalities. Derren snorted, biting back a laugh, but his eyes flicked toward Eliana. Not directly, no, that'd be too obvious. Just enough to watch for it, that tiny reaction, that small tell. And there it was. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, but it was there. The slightest tightening of her fingers before she relaxed them, the way she squared her shoulders just a bit too precisely. She wasn't looking at them, but she wasn't not looking at them either. Derren grinned like a wolf catching scent of fresh prey. Oh, damn, he murmured. We got tension. Eli, you seeing this? 'Cause I'm seeing this. Eli, standing nearby with a datapad in hand, didn't even glance up. Nope. Not getting involved? Not today. But Derren, he was just getting started. He took an exaggerated step toward Gunner, tilting his head back like he was really thinking it over. Gotta say, boss, never seen you light up for anyone quite like Lissandra. He stroked his chin in mock contemplation. Maybe we should stay a few extra days, huh? Catch up. Get reacquainted. Gunner's gaze snapped toward him, blue eye flat, deadly. It was that look. The one that said, you keep talking and I'm testing Thunderstrike's new ammo on you. Derren grinned wider. Or maybe, he continued, thoroughly enjoying himself, we bring her back with us. Really strengthen those alliances. Hell, she could help us train. Eliana finally turned then. Slow, measured, controlled, the look she gave Derren. Deadly. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was that regal silence, that perfectly unreadable elven calm that somehow carried more weight than an outright threat. Derren knew that look. Victory. Ah, there it is, he said, tapping his temple with a knowing smirk. You're good, but you're not that good, Guardian. Eliana simply tilted her chin up slightly, composed as ever. You mistake pragmatism for concern, she said smoothly. Derren let out a long, satisfied hum. Oh, absolutely, he replied, lying through his teeth. Rose turned away quickly, shaking with silent laughter. She faked a cough, trying to compose herself, but Derren could see the mirth dancing in her eyes. And Gunner? He exhaled, long, slow, exasperated. He pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, I hate you. Derren beamed. I know. Derren grinned, eyes sharp with mischief, opening his mouth to push just a little further. And bah! The sound echoed through the portal chamber loud, clear, and distinctly. Ovine. Silence. A slow, creeping horror spread across Derren's face. He blinked once, twice, then snapped his mouth shut and tried again. Bah! Gunner choked. Rose lost it. Eli, ever the professional, took exactly 3 seconds before doubling over in laughter, dropping her datapad. Derren scowled, pointing an accusing finger at Eliana, whose face remained perfectly neutral, though there was the faintest glimmer of amusement in her eyes. You. Bah! That was it. Rose collapsed against the wall, shaking with laughter while Gunnar turned away, rubbing his hand down his face hard, shoulders trembling. You can't. Bah! Eli was wheezing. Derren stomped forward, attempting to regain some dignity, though it was impossible when his words kept translating into perfect farm, animal dialect. This is abuse of power. Bah! Eliana merely tilted her head, cool as ever. I have no idea what you mean. Derren jabbed a finger at her. You're a menace. Eliana smiled, just slightly. Then, with a casual flick of her wrist, the spell lifted. Derren glared at her, rubbing his throat like it had personally betrayed him. He opened his mouth cautiously, tested the air. You are the worst. Eliana simply gave the faintest nod of agreement. Gunnar, still standing off to the side, finally exhaled through his nose and muttered, That's what you get. Derren threw up his hands. Unbelievable. I get punished for telling the truth. You all heard it. This is why we can't have nice things. Rose wiped at her eyes, breathless from laughing. Oh no, we're keeping this. Forever. Eli, still recovering, picked up her datapad with a wheeze. I swear I will reprogram the facility's security system to play that sound every time you walk in. Derren scowled, but the corner of his mouth twitched. I hate all of you. We know. Eliana's smirk was barely there, barely. But it was there. The portal room emptied, leaving only Gunnar and Eliana standing amidst the quiet hum of residual magic. The echo of laughter still hung in the air from Derren's well-earned humiliation, but now it was just them. Eliana exhaled softly, letting the moment settle. The flickering glow of the runes lining the portal cast shifting light across Gunnar's face, highlighting the sharp edges of a man who rarely allowed himself stillness. He turned to her, expression unreadable at first, but then a smile. It was a rare thing, something small, just the faintest pull at the corner of his mouth. But it was real. Eliana found herself studying it, caught off guard by the warmth in it, by how much it softened the hardened lines of his face. You free for dinner? Gunnar asked, his voice rough but almost light. Eliana blinked. Dinner? His one good eye held hers, steady as ever. Bianca's making fettuccine. She tilted her head slightly, her mind turning over the unfamiliar word. Fettuccine. Gunnar huffed a quiet laugh, shaking his head. You've had Bianca's cooking before. You'll like it. Eliana considered. She had, indeed, experienced Bianca's food before, and while mortal cuisine often varied wildly in quality, Bianca was different. There was something about her cooking, something crafted with care, as though every meal was an offering rather than a necessity. Very well, Eliana nodded. But if this fettuccine is unpleasant, I will hold you responsible. Gunnar smirked, already heading toward the door. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Eliana followed, an amused glint in her eyes. For once, just once, neither of them had to think about the war, the battles ahead, or the weight of the choices they'd made. Just dinner. For now. The scent of garlic and simmering cream drifted through the air as Gunnar and Eliana stepped into the mess hall. Eliana paused, brows lifting slightly. The space had been completely transformed, gone were the lingering signs of destruction from the fight between Rose and Lyra, the shattered tables, the scorch marks, the cracked tiles. In their place stood a sleek, polished mess hall, its rustic charm somehow preserved despite the new reinforcements. The floors gleamed under the soft glow of overhead lights, and the walls bore subtle reinforcement panels that blended seamlessly into the decor. At the far end, Bianca stood behind the counter, arms crossed over her apron, a satisfied smirk tugging at her lips. "Well, well, look who finally decided to grace my kitchen," she teased, waving them over. Gunnar exhaled, eyeing the space. "Didn't think they'd finish this fast." "Neither did I," Bianca admitted, grabbing 2 steaming plates from the counter. "Those damn contractors have been breathing down my neck for weeks, but I finally got them out of here. My kitchen is mine again." She turned, setting the plates down in front of them. Rich, golden pasta piled high with a creamy sauce, seasoned chicken resting on top, garnished with fresh herbs. Eliana leaned in slightly, taking in the scent. It was different. She had eaten mortal food before, some of it good, some of it bland, but this smelled inviting in a way she hadn't expected. "Fettuccine Alfredo," Bianca declared proudly. "Made fresh, just for you two." Then Bianca grinned, her eyes flicking between them before gesturing toward a specific booth in the corner. "I even had that one put in special." Gunnar narrowed his eyes at her smirk. "Special how?" "Just for occasions like this," Bianca winked. Eliana tilted her head, intrigued by the cozy setup, a corner booth, slightly secluded, with plush seating that looked more comfortable than the rest. A warm, dim light hung above it, casting an inviting glow. Gunnar exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You're getting real bold, Bianca." "I live dangerously," she smirked, waving them off. "Now go sit down before your food gets cold." With an amused huff, Gunnar grabbed both plates, glancing at Eliana. "After you, Princess?" Eliana arched a brow but accepted the gesture, moving toward the booth. She slid into the seat, and Gunnar followed, setting their food down before sinking into the cushion opposite her. For a moment it was just the two of them. The mess hall still buzzed in the background, agents chatting, silverware clinking, the faint murmur of the news playing on one of the wall-mounted screens. But here, in this booth, it felt distant. Bianca had known exactly what she was doing. Eliana picked up her fork, glancing at Gunnar. "If this is unpleasant, I will blame you." Gunnar smirked, taking a bite first. "I'll take my chances." Eliana finally lifted her fork, twirling the pasta and tasting it. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her reaction, swallowing with practiced composure. "So?" Gunnar prodded. Eliana set down her fork carefully, lifting her chin. "It is acceptable." Gunnar huffed a laugh, shaking his head. "High praise coming from you." She merely smirked, taking another bite, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Gunnar allowed himself to just breathe. No war, no battles, no politics, just good food. And Eliana, as the last remnants of their meal disappeared, Gunnar leaned back, exhaling in contentment. For once, he actually felt full, not just from the food, but from the brief moment of peace. Across from him, Eliana finished the last bite of her fettuccine with quiet satisfaction, though she kept her expression composed. Bianca swooped in before either of them could stand, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached their booth with an unmistakable air of purpose. "So, tell me, Princess," Bianca began, crossing her arms, "what kind of food do you elves eat?" Eliana lifted a delicate brow, setting her napkin down with practiced grace. "We eat many things, Bianca. You will need to be more specific." "Oh, don't you go giving me that diplomatic answer," Bianca waved a hand. "I mean, I want to know what you all actually like. Your comfort food, your feasts, whatever passes for home cooking in Alfheim." Eliana regarded her with mild amusement. "Why?" Bianca leaned forward, planting both hands on the table. "Because I ain't letting those elves suffer through the swill they serve over at the facility." Gunnar chuckled, shaking his head. "Sounds like a personal problem, Bianca." "Damn right it is," Bianca shot back. "If they're going to be stationed here, working alongside us, then they deserve better than processed cafeteria rations." She turned back to Eliana. "So, you gonna help me out, or do I gotta bribe you?" Eliana tilted her head, considering the request was unexpected. Most humans barely considered elven cuisine beyond the occasional stereotype, light, ethereal, more art than sustenance. But Bianca was different. She wasn't asking for novelty. She was asking because she genuinely wanted the elven forces to feel welcome. Respect. That was rare. I suppose I could provide a few traditional recipes, Eliana allowed, her lips curving into the slightest smirk. Damn right you can, Bianca grinned. But then she smoothly pivoted to her real objective, folding her arms and giving Eliana a knowing look. Course you know what would really help, Bianca mused, tilting her head. Eliana sighed softly, already sensing where this was going. Let me guess. An elven assistant. Bianca beamed as if Eliana had just given her the best idea in the world. See? I knew you were smart. Bianca snapped her fingers. Look, I don't need some five-star royal chef. Just someone who actually knows what the hell they're doing with elven ingredients. Someone who won't look at me like I'm committing war crimes every time I season something. Eliana chuckled softly, shaking her head. You have an interesting way of making requests, Bianca. Yeah, but you'll help, right? Eliana took a thoughtful pause, then nodded gracefully. I will see what I can do. Bianca clapped her hands together, satisfied. That's all I ask. She turned, already muttering about reorganizing her kitchen. Gunnar smirked as he watched her go. You just got recruited, didn't you? Eliana lifted her chin imperiously. Number I merely agreed to assist in ensuring proper nutrition for our allies. The soft murmur of the mess hall had quieted as the last of the night shift cleared out. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting a golden glow over the room. The scent of Bianca's cooking still lingered in the air, mixing with the faint, crisp scent of Eliana's elven robes. Gunnar leaned back against the booth, his single blue eye studying Eliana in the low light. For once, there was no crisis, no reports, no battles waiting at the edge of every conversation. Just the two of them, the remnants of dinner, and the rare sense of something easy. Eliana tilted her head slightly, observing him in return. You're smiling, she noted. Gunnar snorted. Am I? She nodded, a small smirk tugging at her lips. It's rare. Gunnar shifted, exhaling slowly. Well, gotta keep people guessing. Eliana chuckled, reaching for her glass. A moment of peace, then. Looks like. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The world outside didn't exist. No war, no Black Dawn, no Echo Division, just a quiet moment that had been a long time coming. Then, bang! The doors to the mess hall slammed open. Eliana sighed deeply. Gunnar pinched the bridge of his nose, and Eli, still in her work clothes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, strode in like the world was ending. Interrupting something? She asked casually, though the glint in her violet eyes said she knew exactly what she was doing. Gunnar didn't even look at her. Keebler. Eliana, ever composed, merely took a sip of her drink. Eli grinned unapologetically. Yeah, save the grumbling for later. I've got something. She slid into the booth across from them, setting a tablet on the table between them. Gunnar's patience was wearing thin. This better be good. Eli tapped the screen, and a low burst of static crackled before a voice filtered through. It was distorted, garbled from whatever security measures had been in place, but the words were unmistakable. The birth went as expected. The child is stable. They've moved her. Eliana stiffened slightly. Gunnar leaned forward. Who? Eli looked him dead in the eye. Trinity. Silence settled over the table, heavy and suffocating. Gunnar's jaw tightened. She gave birth. Not a question, a statement, a fact. Yeah, Eli confirmed, her usual sharpness subdued, and Black Dawn is keeping the kid close. Eliana's fingers curled slightly against the tabletop, her mind already racing through the implications. Gunnar exhaled sharply. Do we have a location? Eli shook her head. Not yet. I only picked up the chatter. I need time to backtrace it and pinpoint where they moved her. Eliana leaned forward, voice even but laced with concern. Who is the father? Eli hesitated. No mention of that. But let's be real. If Black Dawn is involved, this isn't some normal birth. Gunnar ground his teeth. You think it's engineered? Eli shrugged. It'd be stupid not to assume that. Eliana exchanged a glance with Gunnar. The tension was growing by the second. Gunnar sat back, crossing his arms, his cybernetic fingers tapped once against his bicep. So, what do we know? Eli leaned on the table. Not much yet. But this? She pointed to the tablet. This just became priority number 1. Eliana's eyes darkened. If they've moved her, they won't keep her in one place for long. The longer we take, the harder it will be to track them. Gunnar nodded slowly. Then you'd better get to work. Eli smirked. Already on it. She stood, stretching. By the way, you two enjoy your... whatever this was. She winked, spinning on her heel. The moment she was gone, Eliana exhaled and shook her head. Do you think she does that intentionally? Gunnar rubbed his temple. Absolutely. Eliana gave him a small, knowing smile. You should eat faster next time. Gunnar chuckled dryly. Noted. But the moment was gone, and war was back on the table. The portal room crackled with arcane energy, the runes along the stone walls pulsing in steady waves of violet light. The air was thick with the weight of old magic, an unnatural chill clinging to the chamber, despite the warmth of the torches lining the walls. Gunnar stood rigid, arms crossed, dressed in fresh tactical gear, a departure from his usual battle-worn attire, though no less menacing. His cybernetic arm flexed absently, the silver dagger embedded within humming faintly with power. He was ready. This was a meeting that would either go very well or very, very badly. Rose was less patient, shifting her weight from foot to foot, her black leather gear hugging her frame as she checked over the weapons strapped to her belt. All right, she muttered, exhaling sharply. Let's get this over with. And then there was Derren. Derren, who looked like he was ready to commit murder, not because of the mission itself, but because of what he was wearing. Eliana had warned them that modern tactical gear would stand out too much in Atherin. Blending in was the smarter play, so naturally Rose had taken it upon herself to find something for Derren to wear. And he hated it. This is stupid, Derren grumbled, tugging at the high collar of the dark, fitted coat Rose had forced on him. It was a hybrid of Elven and Atherin designs, long reinforced with plated leather along the shoulders, sleeves lined with intricate silver embroidery to mimic the style of local mercenaries. It was expensive looking, which was exactly why Derren hated it. Rose smirked. Oh, relax. You look dashing. Derren shot her a look. I look like some prissy-ass noble who lost a duel and was forced into exile. Exactly, Rose said, grinning. Now you'll fit right in. Derren adjusted Thunderstrike, his trusty 12-gauge, which was slung across his back, non-negotiable. I don't care what I look like, but if someone tries to take my shotgun, I'm shoving this entire coat down their throat. Rose made a show of adjusting his belt sash, patting his shoulder dramatically. There, now you're ready for the masquerade ball. Go to hell. We're already going. Before Derren could come up with a comeback that would make Rose's ancestors cry, Gunnar cleared his throat. Enough. His lone eye shifted to Eliana, who stood by the portal control panel, watching them with a quiet, unreadable expression. You're sure they'll meet us? Rose asked. Gunnar nodded. Lissandra owes me a debt. She won't refuse this meeting. She better not, Rose muttered. Eliana's gaze softened just slightly, as if she wanted to say more, but instead she lifted her hands, her magic flaring as she activated the portal. The runes ignited in pulsing violet light, the air shifting as the gateway stabilized into a swirling, shimmering vortex. Beyond it, Atherin awaited. Gunnar exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. Without another word, he stepped forward, crossing into the abyss. Rose followed without hesitation, and, after one last murderous glare at Rose, Derren stormed through after them. The portal shimmered, casting eerie shadows along the craggy stone floor beneath their feet. The moment Gunnar, Derren and Rose stepped through, the air changed. Atherin smelled different, like rain-soaked embers and old magic. The realm was caught in its eternal twilight, the sky painted in hues of deep crimson and muted violet. They stood at the entrance of Lissandra's fortress, a castle still bearing the wounds of past battles. Walls were half rebuilt, scorch marks from magical fire still clinging to the stone. The banners of Atherin's new reign flew high, but the weight of its past still clung to the air. Armed guards flanked the path leading inside, but the moment Lissandra stepped forward, the tension in the air shifted. She was a warrior queen, tall, elegant, but every movement spoke of discipline and power. Her silver hair was braided back, exposing the sharp angles of her face, her piercing golden eyes locking onto them with intense calculation. A dark cloak billowed behind her, trimmed in deep sapphire embroidery, the only real mark of her station. For a long moment she simply studied Gunnar. Then a slow, knowing smirk spread across her lips. "I was wondering when you'd come back, Gunnar." Gunnar gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "Lissandra." Derren, standing just behind him, grinned wide. "You look good, Princess." Lissandra shot him a look, but there was no real malice behind it. "Still an insufferable bastard, I see." Derren placed a hand over his chest, feigning offence. "Wounds me every time." She huffed out a breath, then stepped forward and clasped Gunnar's forearm. It was not a soft gesture, but one of respect, acknowledgement between warriors. "You saved me twice," she said, her voice quieter now. "And my realm owes you a debt that will not be forgotten. If you come seeking my aid, you have it. No conditions, no hesitation." Gunnar inclined his head. "I won't waste your time." Lissandra's eyes flicked to Rose, her expression turning shrewd, assessing. "And who is this?" Rose smirked and tipped her head. "Someone who needs access to your realm, and someone you'd be wise not to underestimate." Lissandra's gaze lingered on her a moment longer, then she nodded. "If Gunnar vouches for you, you may pass freely through Atherin, but I warn you," her golden eyes sharpened, "this realm is not what it once was. You will find no safety here. The old world is still trying to consume the new." Without hesitation, Gunnar nodded. "She's pack adjacent." Derren snorted. "That's a fancy way of saying she's a pain in the arse, but she's on our side." Lissandra exhaled slowly, weighing her options. She owed Gunnar and Derren, twice now. They had fought for her, saved her when they had no reason to. Honor demanded repayment. "You'll have your passage," she finally said, her gaze locking onto Gunnar's. "But this makes us even." Gunnar held her stare. "Understood." With a wave of her hand, Lissandra motioned to one of her attendants, a tall, armoured figure who stepped forward and bowed. "Prepare the portal to Concordia," she ordered. "They leave within the hour." Derren clapped his hands together. "Well, that was easy. Almost like you like having us around." Lissandra smirked, stepping closer to him. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Derren. Because if I ever do have to kill you, I won't hesitate." Derren grinned. "Knew there was a reason I liked you." Lissandra rolled her eyes before turning to Gunnar one last time. "You're not going with them?" Gunnar shook his head. "They can handle it." She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Good. Because Atherin is not the only realm at war, and I doubt you'll be able to keep your hands clean for long." Gunnar's expression darkened. "I never do." With that, the deal was struck. The path to Concordia was open. The portal hummed with arcane energy, casting flickering light against the twilight-stained stone walls of Lissandra's stronghold. The air thrummed with latent power, ancient and potent, woven into the very foundation of Atherin. Rose stood before the swirling gateway, adjusting the strap of her bag over her shoulder. Derren, arms crossed, shifted his weight impatiently, his fingers resting on the strap of Thunderstrike slung across his back. He gave a last glance toward Gunnar, as if silently confirming that this was their best course of action. Gunnar returned the look, nodding once. Find what you need, get in and get out. His voice was steel, firm and unwavering, but there was an undertone of something else, something only those who had served with him for years could hear. He didn't like sending his people into unknown dangers. Rose rolled her shoulders, shaking off the weight of his gaze. Don't worry. I'll bring Derren back in one piece. I know he's your favourite. Derren snorted. Damn right I am. Gunnar shot them both a dry look. Don't make me regret this. Lissandra stood beside him, arms folded, watching the exchange with quiet curiosity. Though her stance was regal, her eyes held a glint of familiarity. She had seen these kinds of bonds before, among warriors who had walked through fire together. Rose gave Gunnar one last look, then turned to the portal. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, vanishing into the swirling light. Derren lingered a moment longer, rubbing a hand down his face before muttering under his breath, We are so gonna regret this. Then, with a smirk at Gunnar, he stepped through and the portal sealed shut behind him. A heavy silence settled in the chamber. Gunnar exhaled slowly, turning toward Lissandra. We need to talk. Lissandra arched a brow. Do we? He gave her a look. You know we do. She studied him for a moment, then motioned toward an adjoining chamber. Then let's talk. Together they left the portal room, stepping into the warlord's private council chamber. The room was grand yet functional. Maps stretched across the walls, battle plans scattered across the long wooden table, and weapons mounted like trophies, reminders of the wars fought before her reign. Gunnar took it all in, but his focus remained on Lissandra as she leaned against the table, arms crossed. This isn't just about Rose and Derren, is it? No. His voice was low, controlled. It's about Atherin, and you. Her expression didn't falter, but there was something in her posture that shifted. Go on. He stepped forward, his cybernetic arm flexing as he planted both hands on the table. You've got two sisters still fighting you for control. You've got remnants of your father's power still tainting parts of this realm. And with Draven making moves, the last thing you need is for him to start eyeing Atherin. Lissandra's jaw tightened. You think he will? Gunnar nodded. Draven doesn't just want power, he wants control. And if he gets wind that your realm is still fractured, he might see that as an opportunity. Lissandra exhaled, pushing off the table. I'm aware of the risks. My sisters and I, we're not at war, but we're not exactly unified, either. That needs to change, Gunnar said bluntly. You don't have the luxury of internal strife anymore. If Draven makes a move, you won't have time to rally forces. You need to be ready before he does. She turned away, walking toward a map pinned against the far wall. Easier said than done. My sisters have their own ideas of what's best for Atherin. Gunnar watched her for a moment. Then remind them what happens when someone like your father gets too much power. They lived through his reign. They saw what it did to this realm. They know what's at stake. Lissandra's fingers curled into fists at her sides. And if they refuse? Then you do what you have to. His voice was firm but not unkind. Atherin needs a leader, not a fractured court. She turned back to face him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment neither spoke. Then slowly she nodded. I'll handle my sisters. Gunnar studied her, then gave a curt nod. Good. Because if Draven does come knocking, I need to know where Atherin stands. Lissandra smirked. You're not going to ask me to pledge loyalty, are you? He shook his head. I don't need your loyalty. I need your word. She regarded him carefully, then extended a hand. You have it. He clasped her forearm. A warrior's grip. Then we'll hold the line. Together. The tension in the room settled slightly. There was still much to do, many battles ahead, but for now, a line had been drawn. Gunnar released her arm and stepped back. I'll let you know if I hear anything on Draven's movements. In the meantime, If you need anything, you know how to reach me. Lissandra gave him a knowing smile. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. He didn't respond, just gave a short nod before turning toward the exit. As he walked away, Lissandra's voice stopped him. Gunner. He turned back, her expression softened just a fraction. Stay alive. His lips quirked in a rare half-smile. No promises. With that, he disappeared into the shadows of the stronghold, leaving Atherin and its warlord to prepare for whatever storm was coming next. And Rose and Derren had one hell of a mission ahead of them.